Hello and welcome to the Defense Café, the liberal security and defense podcast of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation in Brussels. I'm Sebastian Vagt, I'm your host from the Friedrich Naumann Foundation.
And my name is Teresa Reiter, I'm a liberal defense enthusiast from Austria, Vienna.
We are back from summer break, and today's guest will be your host. Yes, that's right. And today's other guest will be your future host, because we will have a handover. And that's because I will leave you. I have accepted a new job as head of the Naumann Foundation's office in Morocco. So I will leave the defense and security community for a while. And today we will meet your new host, Jeroen Dobber from the Netherlands.
And since we are also talking to our guest about one important topic of the European military and armed forces, we are going to talk about national armies admitting other EU citizens to their service and what are the advantages and disadvantages and possible difficulties with that. And you will also hear the answer to a long kept secret, which is which animal Sebastian thinks best represents the European military.
So here we are with your future host and today's guest, Jeroen Dobber from the Netherlands. Jeroen Dobber, the new head of the FNF Security Expert Hub in Brussels. Hi, Jeroen.
Hi, Sebastian. Hi, Teresa.
Hi.
Hi, Jeroen. How are you doing? It's been 100 days roughly since you succeeded me in that job in Brussels. How are you doing?
Yeah, great. It's been a very interesting few months. Lots of work, and I've been able to piggyback a bit on the work that you have initiated. So that has been great. And we have a few new activities coming up as well. So I'm very excited about that, and it's been a very good experience so far.
Great. Maybe you can tell us and our listeners a few words about yourself. Where does your interest in defense come from?
Yeah, I have perhaps a slightly unconventional background as a guest and soon host in this podcast, because I graduated as a political economist, but I've always been very interested in more geopolitical questions, and I think my interest in the security and defense sphere really started when I did an internship at the EU delegation in New Delhi, and there I worked a lot on the Kashmir issue, which brought together a lot of different security issues. And after that, I moved to Brussels, and I worked in a bunch of different places. And I always had the opportunity to still work on foreign and security policy there. So I've always been interested in that, and I've also always followed your work and the work of the Security Hub. So when you got your new job in Morocco, that was not only for you a great opportunity, but I also thought then I have to apply for that position, and that's how I ended up here.
Yeah, happy to hear that. I'm sure you'll do a great job, and I'm looking forward to listening to you as a host. And I'm looking forward to stepping back myself to the role of a guest. I think being a guest is so much more fun. So when do we do the handover? Is it now?
Do we do some kind of ceremony, or should we just change the rules?
Maybe
I think you have to kill him. Isn't that it? To be the new king, you have to kill the old king.
Long live the king! Yeah.
Maybe you can play some fancy music, and then that's the moment when you are now the official host of the Defense Café, together with Teresa.
So welcome, Sebastian, our guest of today.
Thank you for having me.
How have you been?
Thanks, very well. I am already the director of the Naumann Foundation's office in Morocco, although I'm still in Germany. The rules haven't allowed me to travel to Morocco yet, which is bizarre because I am now a tele-director, doing my job from here via Zoom. Kind of bizarre, but as it looks now, I can go to Morocco pretty soon, and I'm very much looking forward to that.
Very good. And what we wanted to discuss with you today is one of your favorite ideas for more European defense cooperation. And you've been in your position at the Security Hub for a number of years, and before that, of course, you were in the military yourself. So surely you will have come across a few ideas. And we wanted to ask you today what your favorite idea is, and if you could expand a bit more on that.
Yes, more than happy to do so. To provide some background, I believe that in Europe we are talking a lot about capabilities, about ships and tanks and airplanes. Ships, tanks and airplanes which are too expensive, which are being delivered too late. The problem being that we have a fragmented defense equipment market, 28 national markets, and so on. We do not talk that much, however, about people, about the personnel that needs to operate this equipment, that needs to contribute key qualifications to make our armed forces operational. And I know by my own experience that there is a significant shortage when it comes to personnel in many European armed forces. When I was a deputy commanding officer on a German naval vessel, it was the absolute standard that I had to walk around in the harbor before we could sail and to look for people on other boats that would sail with us so that we had the necessary numbers to leave harbor. So that shows how severe the shortages are in many areas. So we lack people and we lack qualifications. And one reason for that, I believe, is that the labor market is also fragmented. We have 28 national markets. And I'm not proposing that people from Italy move to Denmark in order to work in the Danish armed forces. But we now have so many people who live in different countries. Just like you, Jeroen, you live in the Netherlands and you live in Belgium, but you are from the Netherlands. And there's 17 million of these mobile citizens in the EU. But as the rules are right now, they cannot serve in the armed forces of the country where they live. And I think by opening national armed forces to the European citizens who live in these countries anyway, would help a lot to ease that shortage of personnel.
I've got a question because you mentioned the military labor market, and I mean the military labor market is not free from problems that we have in the regular labor market in the EU. So there is a significant difference between the wage you get in the German military and you would get in, I don't know, Romania, Bulgaria, whatever. Isn't there a danger of having like a pull effect in the labor market so that people from national armies in the more east or in the south would then go to work for militaries elsewhere where they can get a higher wage? Because that can't be good for European security either, right?
Yes, absolutely. This concern is very real. Germany, I believe, has considered this idea on different occasions, and every time the defense ministers, even the prime ministers of, for example, Poland, were very concerned because of exactly that reason. I believe, however, that there is an easy way around that, because, as I said, you do not want to target other countries' citizens to become your soldiers. You want to target the people that do already live in your country. And you also, it's not only about you as an employer, it's also about their rights as citizens, as members of their society, because what is the justification to exclude them from a job opportunity in the military? And there is one good example in Europe, which is Belgium. They have opened up their national armed forces already back in the early 2000s. And the only requirement in Belgium to serve in the Belgian armed forces is that you need to speak French or Dutch. And that's enough. So experience shows that foreigners, there's about roughly 200 foreigners serving the Belgian armed forces. All of them have lived in Belgium already before, because this language requirement is sufficient to prevent people from moving all across Europe to work in a foreign military.
Why do you think Belgium was so open to the idea? Why is it so normal there that this is okay, and elsewhere it's so much more difficult?
That's very interesting. I had a chat with the president of the Belgian Soldiers Association at that time, and when that question arose, I think that was back in 2004, there was no shortage. So the employer's perspective wasn't important at that time. At that time, it was rather a citizens' rights or labor rights debate. So the key question was not why, the key question was why not. And since they didn't find any good reason, for example, some people said, well, how can German or Italian people defend Belgium? But then they said, when was the last time that Belgian soldiers defended Belgium on the Belgian borders? So they came across this why not question, and the response was that there is no real argument against it, and so they did it. And now they benefit from it because now there are those shortages, and now they have a larger recruitment pool.
So Sebastian, that really you already referred to it a bit. This kind of loyalty question, that people question the loyalty of other EU nationals who would serve in national armies. Could you tell us a bit more about what kind of reservations you came across? Because that seems to be a very strong argument against it. How have you seen that?
And also, maybe if I may add, not just the question of loyalty, but also the question of possible conflicts of interest. Like within the EU, this should be no concern, theoretically, but is it still an argument against it in the debate?
Yeah, that's a very good point. There's always this argument that someone who serves in a different country with that country's flag on his sleeve was a mercenary. Well, but still, I mean, we're not recruiting Indians here to invade France. We're talking about sending people to missions where European nations cooperate anyway. If you look at the German armed forces, for example, if you look at the map of their missions, all their missions are circular shaped around Europe, and all those missions are conducted together with national armed forces from other European countries. And a scenario, talking about conflict of interest, a scenario where two European armed forces would be on opposing sides of an armed conflict is fortunately very hard to imagine. This is true for the European Union. This is not true for NATO. If you look at Turkey, if you look at the recent confrontations and conflicts of interest of European countries in Turkey and Libya and Syria, that's a totally different thing. If you look at the European Union, I believe that's not a problem. Let me say one more thing. You were talking about reservations. I had this debate a lot in Germany, and I found that people who were very proud to be German because their ancestors were not all German, like talking about people whose parents were Turkish, and the parents did not have a German citizenship, but the children acquired German citizenship at some point, and then they could enter the armed forces. Those people are very, very proud to be German. And the ultimate proof of being German and being accepted in the German society is being part of the military. So those people feel offended if people from other countries who do not have a German citizenship, but maybe a Portuguese or a Romanian, if they can also serve in the armed forces, it diminishes their pride. It diminishes what they have achieved. So this is one of the reservations that I came across when I discussed this in Germany. But still, I believe there is no valuable moral argument against doing this in a European context.
One more thing I thought about is that serving in the military, I mean, when we talk about this now, it's more about, we think about the normal duties of a soldier, basically. But intelligence is also part of the military in many countries. So there is a civil intelligence part in many countries, but also military one. So in this case, I would maybe disagree that it is so easy to avoid conflicts of interest, because if you look at the very recent history in Europe, Austria used to have until not a long time ago a far-right government, and other intelligence services in Europe denied Austria information because of our government's very strong ties to Russia. So is this something you think about? Because with intelligence, I think the story is a little bit different. Is it a possibility to maybe make restrictions on when it comes to intelligence, when other EU nationals would serve in national army, or what do you think?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, there are lots of restrictions in place. I mean, very few soldiers have access to confidential or highly confidential documents anyway. But the question is also if let's say because someone has the citizenship of Hungary, does it also mean that he is serving the interest of the Hungarian government, or has any relationship to the Hungarian government? So what you're saying implies already that that other European countries would try to put spies into such a role. You're right, with the rise of right-wing populism and with authoritarian tendencies in some EU countries, that might happen. That's true. But then again, you do have the same could happen with your own citizens, and you do have those background checks when it comes to higher levels of confidentiality. So I wouldn't believe that your citizenship is such a crucial factor when it comes to trusting you as a member of the armed forces.
I hope you're right in reality.
I think that's an interesting question, actually, Teresa, because perhaps it could also really add value to intelligence to have people with other nationalities on board, and of course, people would also not have access to all the information that is present within the organization. So, if you structure that in a certain way, it could also really add value to an organization to have a different perspectives represented there.
I think that's not only a very strong argument for the intelligence side of it, but for the whole army, because this is actually one of the strongest arguments for admitting other EU citizens to your national army, to have different perspectives, different languages, different kinds of experience in other military service to increase interoperability between national armies within Europe. So I think this is actually one of the strongest arguments.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I've stated this employer's argument and I've stated the employee argument, but you're totally right. From a European perspective, it has a strong signal effect. We can only assume that the number of mobile citizens is rising. It would be very weird if it wasn't. And this would help to create something like a small European armies from the bottom up, because the way we think about European army is always like we install a European defense minister, everything is top down, but this is a bottom up way. We just have to or national armed forces have to think about how they integrate those people. They shouldn't do it like the French army does it. They shouldn't have like a legion or a division of foreigners within their national armed forces. They should make sure that they're not all in the same division, but they're distributed over their military structure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you already. I mean, I know you wrote a paper about this whole topic, and that you looked at
countries where this is still possible. And there are also differences between these countries, how they do it, like you just stated it, but also like there are limits like in how far up you can be promoted or something. There are some restrictions in some countries. Can you explain a little bit what you came across when looking at this issue at different countries?
Yeah, it's indeed quite interesting. If you just look at the 27 EU member states, you have one group of countries where, as a foreign citizen, you can't do anything. Like mostly Central and Eastern European countries, there's just no way you can't apply there. Citizenship is an absolute requirement. And then you have others who have a colonial history and who have strong ties to their former colonies, which means if you are from Peru, you can apply to the Spanish armed forces. If you are from France, you can't. Then you have this special case of France with the Foreign Legion, which is a totally different model. It's basically a mercenary model. They basically accept anyone, but then those people will stay completely apart from the regular military. And then you have some other countries who have limited access. So, for example, in Denmark, if you're German, you can be a soldier in the Danish military, but you can never be an officer. And there's only 2 countries who basically don't care, who really ask for the same requirements when it comes to foreigners, or for them, your citizenship is like the color of your eye. It just doesn't matter. And those 2 countries are Belgium and Ireland. There's one important difference, because Belgium requires you to be an EU citizen, whereas Ireland really doesn't care. Now, Ireland is really special because they're not a NATO member. They have a very tiny military. So maybe for them it's a bit easier. But Belgium is the really interesting case because they are so highly integrated and also so active in missions abroad. And their experiences so far are just there aren't any. There's nothing has changed. That's basically the key message, and I guess that's a pretty good message.
Have you ever met any non-nationals who work in the Irish or in the Belgian militaries, and heard about their experiences?
Yes, I've met a Dutch soldier, or a Dutch person who is a Belgian soldier. Obviously, that's not much of a cultural difference, so it's not that spectacular. But it shows that naturally, if a country opens its national armed forces to EU citizens, those will come from the diasporas that are in its country anyway. So in the Belgian case, those 200, they are mostly Portuguese, Italian, Dutch, German, and French, because those are the largest groups in Belgium. And so if Germany, for example, opens up, they know already which countries will be represented. And the same goes for most other countries as well. And as I said, it will only help to reflect the composition of society also in the military. It will not be a large cultural change or anything.
There's also the case of Luxembourg, I think, right? I mean, you wrote it in your paper. I mean, it's much smaller, and the army of Luxembourg is not huge, as you can imagine. But I remember you telling me that they wanted to specifically include Portuguese, right? There is like a large diaspora in Luxembourg or something. Do I remember that right?
That's correct. In Luxembourg, like in Denmark, you cannot become an officer, so they're not fully open. But a sizable portion of the Luxembourg military, like a third or so, is Portuguese. That's right.
Okay. And there is also, I mean, you can also say, like, for example, to put restrictions on this mechanism, basically, and say, okay, you have to be in a country for X years to be able to work in the military, to be sure that you have this factor of identification with the country, and somebody really has the life there, and therefore it also makes a lot of sense for them to be able to work in the national army of this country, right?
Yeah, exactly. This is also one way to prevent people. I mean, it may always happen that, let's say, Austria opens its national armed forces, and someone who lives in Poland and who speaks perfectly German could, of course, come to Austria and then be an Austrian soldier instead of a Polish soldier. So this could theoretically always happen. So by establishing such a requirement of residency, this could be a way to prevent migration for military service, because this is what we would like to prevent. We don't want to have competition over our soldiers. That's what we don't want to happen. We just want to be able to recruit the ones that are in our country already.
It's an interesting parallel to voting rights, huh? If you think about it that way. Like if you think European citizens should be able to vote wherever they are, you have similar arguments to why not, basically, or what are the difficulties to come across.
Yeah, absolutely. It's part of the It's not only the military. I mean, we're talking about we can definitely talk about other components of the civil service as well. But that's interesting because there's also, of course, European rules on that, and there's a rule that says that the civil services should basically be open to European citizens, but when it comes to security critical services, we're not talking about the railway company, but we talk about like the military, the police, then as a country you can have those restrictions. But yeah, you're right. It could be a part of the European citizenship. Yeah.
It's a good way to think about it, right? As a part of a larger picture of what are European citizens' rights, and this is not a singular issue that we should discuss totally isolated from everything else that we're discussing about European citizens' rights. So, yeah.
It sounds, all in all, it sounds like a very sensible idea. And with sensible ideas, it's of course interesting to see what happens with them. What can we expect? You think? Do you see this discussion coming up in more European countries?
Well, one question, of course, is always how much do we get out of it? This is very hard to tell. I did a little calculation just based on the data that exists, and I said if every country opened up, and if every country received the same number of foreign citizens in its national armed forces as Belgium, you would have something like 15,000 additional soldiers in Europe, which would be a Danish military on top of the others. But this is pure speculation. I don't know if that's true. Will we have this discussion? Very hard to tell. Probably not, because there is a pattern. When the economy is doing well, the military has a hard time to recruit people. So until the start of the corona crisis, we have seen those dramatic shortages in key qualifications and numbers. Now, probably the military will benefit from COVID-19, and it will be much easier because the military is always a safe place to go on the labor market. They're always there. They will always pay you. And so now it's easier for militaries to recruit, and the urge to take an innovative measure like that is lower. And I believe that most countries will need such an urge, because they're not like Belgium. They don't ask why not, they ask why. And so we probably need to wait for the full recovery of national economies before we can have that debate again.
Yeah.
It might also happen that country by country, the debate pops up about citizens' rights, right? I mean, the military might not be the reason for this to happen, but people suing for their rights or equal treatment. maybe that's the more likely way this is going to be introduced, not because somebody wants to do a European army in their national country. So,
yeah, very probable. If you look at the way how the German military opened up to women, I mean, there's no reason for the German government or the German military to be proud of anything, because it was just a single woman who sued for her right to join the military. So it was a legal decision, not even by a German court, but by the European Court of Justice. So that might as well be a way how it could come about.
we don't want to encourage anyone, but if somebody's listening and you have some time on your hands,
This goes out to all the mobile citizens listening here.
Wasn't it, Teresa, wasn't it actually brought up in Austria before this discussion?
Yes. So Sebastian made this excellent suggestion at one of our Defense Hub meetings a while ago. And well, I seem to be the only one who listened because I actually took his suggestion and put it into a motion that the Austrian Liberal Party, NEOS, put forward in the Austrian Parliament. So the situation was, it was briefly before the European elections in 2019. It was April. We had a program that focused very strongly on the idea of United States of Europe and the European Army, which was quite a courageous move of our top candidate, Claudia Gammon, because Austria is neutral and neutrality is still some sacred thing somehow. But this was part of our whole idea. So if we have the United States of Europe, that of course we need a European military, European army. And because the concept of the European army seems so big and so artificial for people who cannot really imagine what it would be like, what it would mean, whether we would still have a say in defense issues in the European Union, all the arguments that we know, right? So we decided to try and focus on the bottom-up approach that Sebastian proposed in his paper. And so we put forward that motion in the Austrian Parliament. And it was really interesting because in Austria the situation is like that, citizenship is an absolute requirement as well. We have a shortage of military personnel, like many countries. Also, the Austrian army is very underfunded, also like in many countries, but the Austrian one is really like one of the worst funded in Europe. We are like basically on one level with the very small states of the European Union. So it's still a very dramatic situation in terms of military personnel. And the Austrian Parliamentary Control Commission of the Austrian Army has said in 2017 that with a little bit above 20,000 soldiers, we have hit what we can do with our capacities. We've hit the maximum. We cannot do any more, but there are more and more tasks brought to the Austrian military, and with them changing threat perceptions and changing threats in the world. So much more is going on that the Austrian military should have an answer to, but we don't have enough personnel. So you would really have an interest in the Austrian military to find a way to recruit more people. But this really, I mean, I from the debates that I had with other political parties in Austria, it was really strange because obviously those on the far right were totally against it, because for them the Austrian military is some national pride thing, some patriotic thing that is totally different from what it means to be a European citizen. The European citizenship is nothing as a concept that really appeals to them. So for them, it was totally out of the question. Then on the left, you have all these people who think we should abolish the idea of an army, an Austrian one or a European one anyway. So they were really like, this is just a way of bringing more arms into the world and talking more about the military. And for them, it was like completely against the idea of peace. So for them, it was out of the question as well. But the center parties, so the Social Democrats and the Conservatives, I would have thought that they would at least join us in the debate and find arguments why we wouldn't do this. but there was nothing. There was complete silence. I remember that in the parliamentary committee, nobody even said a word. And it was quite appealing. Like, we had an election campaign and we were talking to citizens about the idea, and it seemed that it really appealed to them. But on a political level, it seemed like almost lazy, And our motion wasn't even to open it up. Our motion was to look into how, under which circumstances we could open it up and what it would, contribute to the Austrian military service. So we phrased it really carefully to just, start a discussion. We didn't want to step on anyone's toes, because actually we just thought it was a good idea and something that we could discuss without, sparking chaos somewhere or negative feelings. But that totally wasn't the case. So.
Yeah, well, it was very nice to see it actually being brought up. It's very rare that it comes up in any national debate, so that was great. But I do understand it's an idea with which you can't immediately win much politically. It makes people afraid, and if you win in terms of citizens' rights and maybe better recruitment numbers, it will take a while. But if you're very unfortunate and there's one person who there's a scandal with one person coming with a different citizenship, there can be immediate negative feedback. So I guess that's also one reason why it is hard to implement politically.
Yeah, and it's also, I know it from the Austrian military and the military general. It has an effect on integration policy, right? So you have people with migration background in the armies, but they have to have citizenship, right? So I think the fear also, one other factor in Austria might also be that we really have a problem with racism, and maybe that is also contributing to the fear of admitting EU citizens to the European army, to the national army. But you already have people there with a migration background, and nothing bad is happening. On the contrary, actually, it really has a positive effect.
Okay, very good. It's really interesting to also hear a bit then about how that worked out in practice, because I think that would probably the political dynamic would be pretty similar in a lot of other countries, I suppose. So let's hope that the liberal parties get a lot of votes, so that we can build up a bit more momentum to push forward this issue. I think we're gonna have to wrap up soon, but I don't think we should leave before asking one final question. Maybe Teresa, maybe you want to ask it this time. It's a traditional question. Sebastian has asked it many times.
Yes.
So he will know that it's coming, and he better be prepared.
Yeah, so I'm asking it to Sebastian because I wasn't sure who the guest is today. So I'm like, okay, we'll talk about your opinion on that in a later episode, Jeroen.
Yeah.
But there's one question we always have that Sebastian came up with, which is if the European military would be an animal, what animal would it be, or what animal should it be, and why, Sebastian?
If you believe it or not, I haven't prepared a response.
I really
Ironically,
don't believe it, because that's all you talk about all the time.
Yeah, I was so used to asking it myself that I didn't prepare a response. But let me give you a spontaneous response, since we've spoken about integrating foreign nationals into our own armed forces. And since we've had so many predators and mean animals like tigers and lions before, let me say a parrot.
A parrot?
A parrot, because parrots are very colorful animals, and that's exactly what I've just proposed. And they are extremely intelligent. That's one of their dominant character traits, and I think we need an intelligent European army. And I think they can move quickly, apparently, and they also have a strong and powerful beak, so they can do harm if they want. And they have a tremendous lifespan. Sometimes they even get older than people. So yes, the European army in my imagination is a parrot.
That is an excellent answer. The European War and Peace Parrot by Sebastian Vagt.
Great. Well, that's a nice off-the-cuff animal that you came up with there. Very good. The parrot. I'm sure we will remember that.
We have to wish Sebastian good luck in his new job, right? I mean, first of all, we need to say thank you because this whole podcast was Sebastian's idea, as many things in the Defense Hub have been. And I really enjoyed doing this with you. And I'm very sad as usual when you leave me in some kind of project that we're doing together. But I'm getting a new partner in crime, so I'm happy about that. And best of luck for your new job, Sebastian.
Thank you so much. I'm sure there will be lots of anecdotes that I can tell you very soon. It makes me also a bit sad to leave, but that's life. We're all always moving on. And we will stay in touch. And it's great to see you carry on the project. And I'll definitely listen to the podcast. And you'll do a great job. Best of luck to both of you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sebastian. Best
Bye,
of luck to you
Sebastian.
too.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Wow, that was really an end of an era with Sebastian leaving the Defense Café.
You have no idea what it means to me. I've been through a lot with this man and his love for animals. So what are we going to do next in this podcast, Jeroen?
Yeah, well, we're gonna keep going, of course, and I think we're gonna look for guests who can tell us a bit more about Brexit, and perhaps we want to go a bit more into the topic that we discussed today. So we're gonna have to look for interesting personalities there to talk to.
Yes. I mean, with all the pandemic, we almost forgot about Brexit, so we're going to bring this very nice memory back to all of our listeners, and also dig deeper in the experience of serving in another EU national army and try to find some expertise on that to bring that to our listeners. If you have liked this episode and liked our podcast so far, please be so kind and share it on social media, tell other people about it, and stay tuned for our next episode. Thank you.
Talk to you next time.